Hi, everyone. Doc T here with another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to try to get into the weeds or the details, the stuff that makes you all want to run and scream. I want to just cover a couple of different things that I've experienced this week. I'm also going to try to stop saying a lot, which isn't going to work. It's just the way I talk as I pause to think about what's happened since the first to today. There has been so much going on. Today, of course, is election day here in North America, where we vote for our midterm ballots of candidates for governors and Congress and Senate, and those of us who've been around for a while, meaning more than 30 years, and certainly 40 and 50 years, have noticed that there's a lot of changes going on in the way people think and act toward each other. They are so inclined to believe what they believe. And this is called cognitive dissonance, which means you know what you know, and you don't want to change anything because you're comfortable with what you know. You don't want to question things. You don't want to expand and say, but why? My favorite expression is, but why, mommy? And that's what children will do. But why, mommy? Why is this? Why is that? And mommy keeps explaining things until at some point, mommy gets frustrated and says, go ask your father. And of course, the father says, because I said so. So we are fed all sorts of information through the news media and through our favorite sources, whether it's social media, magazines that we read, websites that we find, and we believe in what we hear. And it's just coming to a head today. I don't know the results of the election. This is being recorded before that. Everything up until then is all conjecture. In other words, we're just guessing. It's like watching a football game or any other sport where you say, well, this team should win, and yet something happens and that team doesn't win. And you just sit there in disbelief because how can this be? You know, our beliefs are so strong in what we know. And we are not willing to ask the difficult questions and dig deep. And that's what the Horses Advocate is all about. I am here to question everything I've been taught as a veterinarian and as a horseman and compare that to what I see every day working with horses. So I'm coming up on the 50th year. I'm sure I'm going to have some sort of brilliant podcast next May when I say that I'm guessing May of 2023, which will celebrate my 50th year with horses, and certainly a long time as a veterinarian and as a tooth specialist. And I just know that some of the beliefs, some of the things I was taught, either we didn't have the answers then and new answers are coming our way, or we did know the answers, but our answers are flat out wrong. So when November 1st came around and I saw this horse and the horse is laid up for suspensory or tendon, I can't remember which, and the horse's hair coat didn't look that great. And I turned to the woman and said, so what's your feeding program? She threw her hands right up in the air. And if you're watching this on the video, you know, the hands are straight up in the air and her head's turned to the side, like visibly putting a wall up saying, I know your beliefs in grain and horses. And she turns and she starts to walk away. And here's the evidence. The horse's top line is going, its hair coat doesn't look good, and it's already lame. And the horse is, I'm guessing, I forgot to tell you the truth, I think it was like 7 years old. And it shouldn't be this way at 7. This is just way too young. This isn't an ancient horse that's been campaigned. This is a new horse that's failing. And the woman didn't want to hear it. And it took me by such surprise that I was basically shut down inside. I just start to curl up because nobody's willing to listen and change their views on things, even though the evidence is right in front of their face. They know what they know. Cognitive dissonance. You can look up what that is. There's reams and reams of information on that on the web, on courses at colleges, in podcasts where you can learn about it. And it's one of those words that is important in our way that we work with horses. The Wall Street Journal many years ago was asked if the term fake news was actually real. So somebody decided to look into it. And of course, when news comes out, there's always an agenda. Usually the agenda, it should be the agenda, is to give unbiased information that helps us decide and think about things. But that's not what newspapers do anymore. They just spew out what they believe is true, and they take it off a news feed such as Reuters or someplace like that have been around for 60, 70, 80 years, where they give out a piece of information and all the news outlets grab onto it. And this is why if you listen to the news from 6 or 8 different channels, you're going to hear the same words said. And I always find that fascinating, because that just means there's basically 1 or 2 players behind the scenes dictating all the other news outlets. And the same is true with horses. There are a couple of people who are very good at what they do. They have earned a position of authority in the world of veterinary medicine and horse care. And they either have paid for through advertising or have earned the right to stand up in front of fellow colleagues and give their thoughts and views. And they should. I think it's great. But then there's something that the Wall Street Journal said was called cognitive laziness. And I wrote a whole blog about this years ago. But cognitive laziness is basically we are too lazy to dig in and find the truth. So I can look at you square in the eyes outside and say, well, it's dark outside. And you're going to turn and you're going to look outside and you say, no, the sun is shining. And so you did your due diligence and you checked what I said against a reference that is an authority, which is your own eyes. And you looked outside and the sun was shining. And therefore you knew that I was wrong. So you weren't cognitively lazy there. But if I said it was, after dark, it's beyond sunset, and you just took me for my word, you didn't do your due diligence. Maybe you're inside a room and you didn't look outside. There's no windows in this room. So you just had to believe me because, you trust me. And we tend to trust the people around us because we tend to surround ourselves with people that are important to us, who we believe in, whether it's family or professors or journals that we tend to like. And you've had me, if you've been with me for a while, I've taken magazines and read straight from them and then debated what they're trying to say and argue that maybe what they're coming to as far as a conclusion goes is right or wrong. So I'm going to do that again with my next episode. I'm just going to dig into the latest issue of Equus, I think it is. Pardon me, it's The Horse. I have it right here. And I'm going to discuss some of the articles that are in there. So that was one event. Another event was a lady that I saw. She was at a client's house, and this client, she and I get along great, and we talk about her horse and nutrition. And the other woman happened to be there when I was there, and she owned the other horse. And this other horse is 22 years old and has Cushing's disease and has a very poor top line and is on medication for Cushing's disease and had a dental problem, a dental issue that was fairly serious. It created a tract going from the mouth up into the sinuses. So food was getting up in there and pus was coming out the nose, and it was pretty disgusting. She had taken the horse to Cornell, the vet school that I graduated from. And there they did their magic and either extracted a tooth or put a patch in or did both. And the horse apparently is resolving. And that's fine. So I asked her questions such as, well, do you understand? Did they explain to you? Did anybody attempt to explain to you? You're a veterinarian at Cornell. What's behind the tooth of it going bad? What was behind the sinus and the gum infection? What was behind the Cushing's disease and the loss of the top line? And she says she just gets this, I hate to say it, an attitude of, I don't want to know. I mean, the horse had been through enough. For goodness sakes, he's 22. And why should we even discuss it? He's just old. And that really took me by surprise, because at 22, a horse shouldn't be old. It's like looking at a 60-year-old man and saying, well, you're too old. You should just retire and just give it up. You're going to be dead in a few years anyway. And that bothered me. But what really bothered me even more was in the conversation, I find out that she's a veterinarian. Small animal, but she's still a veterinarian. And I'm like shocked. And I said, but don't you want to understand what Cushing's is? Well, she says it's a pituitary enlargement. I'm like, yeah, but why is it enlarged? And she came to a grinding halt. She didn't know what was causing the pituitary to become overreactive and produce this excess ACTH. All she knew was Cushing's disease is enlarged pituitary. It's not functioning right, and put on Percend, and that's the end of it. And she's a colleague. And that just, I just knew that I was being shut down, shut out, whatever. And I said, okay, well, let's go in and, I said to my client, let's go in and float the teeth. And there's no point, and maybe it's because I'm getting old and crotchety, but there's no point to try to beg people to listen, to understand, and to prevent. And I knew that my client was on board. She's listened to me. She's very intelligent. She understands science very well. And it just shocked me that someone in our profession is so unwilling to dig deep and understand the root causes. They just want to move on. Next patient, let's go on, even when it's their own horse. So, and I was also frustrated with Cornell, because here they are explaining how the tooth is bad and fixing it. And kudos to them for their ability to do this. But what about preventing further damage to the horse's mouth? I remember in the 1980s when I went through vet school, in the late 70s, there was nothing in the textbooks about dental caries, about fractured teeth, about any problems with the teeth. They did say that horses do get sinus problems, and we did a sinus flap that opened up the face and allowed us to either drain out the pus or punch out the bad tooth. But there's nothing in there about why. And it was not that common. And certainly fractured cheek teeth, there's no mention of it in the vet textbooks. So now I see fractured cheek teeth a lot, although I'm seeing a little bit less as my clients are getting off grain. But nobody's questioning, why are horses getting these dental caries, this necrosis of the pulp chambers, the decay, which weakens the tooth and causes it to split. And we know that cavities in humans are caused by excess sugar intake. In fact, oatmeal was at the root cause of cavities in Brooklyn back in the 1930s when they did studies, and they realized that oatmeal was causing a problem. So they took the children off oatmeal and the cavities suddenly lessened. In fact, some actually cured themselves, which I just found beyond fascinating, because here we are feeding our horses excess sugar in the form of grain and hays 24/7, 365 that are high in sugar content in the middle of winter. And these mouths don't get any rest. Then you throw in a Previcox or two. Sorry, Previcox, but it's been shown that one anti-inflammatory thrown in the mouth can cause disruption of the oral microbiome. So you have a disrupted oral microbiome plus the excess sugar that's being put in there in the form of candies, treats, cookies, and grain and hay. And we're having this microcosm inside the mouth that's just ripe for decay. And it'd be so easy to stop this. And of course, we're getting EOTRH, the disease of the incisors that is caused by the demise of the bone that's underlying the incisors. And this demise, no one's addressing. They're saying it's probably an autoimmune disease, but no one's saying, well, what's the cause of this? So we have a lot of questions to ask. And that brings me to my third client who, she's so funny. She's got two horses, a 26-year-old and a 30-year-old, and they both look pretty good. She doesn't feed them any grain except for maybe a handful. And she isn't feeding extra protein. And the horses are doing fine. And they're from good stock, basically. They've lived this long, and trying to change things might get difficult. But the horse is losing its top line and lost some fat this winter. And she's attributing it to the horse being 30 years old. I started to talk to her about what to do. She says, Doc, I read all your stuff, but as soon as you got into the science part of it, I just turned off because I'm just not into science. And so I lost her. Instead of her asking me, hey, Doc, can you dumb it down a little bit? Can you just tell me what to do? She just shut down completely and is doing her own thing. She's gotten some sweet feed from the neighbor. And it's just, I just sit here so frustrated that people are not willing to dig in and really help their horse. And I shouldn't get frustrated. I'm not, because I get kudos all the time from people I haven't seen for a while, people from around the world that I've never seen. And they're constantly telling me, gee, thanks, Doc. You're helping so many horses and helping so many people with the horses. Keep it up. Keep doing it. And I live for those things. It really helps me keep moving forward. But then I hit up against these roadblocks 3 in 1 week. And it makes me question, okay, what do you, the listener, really want to hear? What is it that is compelling you to listen to these podcasts or read the information I've got on the website? What makes owning a horse important to you? The biggest reason I find from a lot of people is the expression, I just want to do the best for my horses. And I've warned people that that can cause a lot of damage to horses, because by doing what you think is best for the horse, you're actually damaging the horse. You're feeding, pounds of carrots a day, giving some cookies, and then you're spending half your money on supplements that the horse really doesn't need. And of course, you're feeding senior feed to a 15-year-old because you think they're getting old. And you don't want to do the best for the horse based on somebody else's opinion that has an agenda tied to it. You need to dig down deep yourself and start to understand the processes, start to understand how horses were made, how they're supposed to be in the real world, and realize that as long as you have a fence put up around them and they're eating a monograss pasture and a monograss hay, meaning one, maybe 2 or 3 different varieties, but they're not getting the smorgasbord they get if they migrated from here to Kentucky for the summer and down to Alabama for the winter. So we are keeping horses in confinement, and it's upon our responsibilities to feed and raise these horses correctly. And that's what the Horse Advocate is all about. So for the last lady, I said simply, simply, there's 2 things you have to do. Remove all inflammatory ingredients, add high quality protein. If you want to add a third thing, write everything down in a journal, because a lot of these things take a while to catch on. It takes months to get the hooves to look right, months to years to get the top line looking right. The horse is 30, you probably will never get the top line to look right, because the horse is no longer able to make the muscle he could have when he was a young horse. And it takes 2 years to get the immune system right, for the skin to heal, to go through a whole summer with just a little bit of fly spray here and there and no worries about what the flies are doing to the skin. Yeah, 2 years it takes of high quality protein, no more inflammatory ingredients. But then you come across the competitor, these horses that are being used for competition, and the trainers and the owners believe that you have to feed energy. And these are one of these concepts that I just don't understand. You're feeding raw materials. The raw materials are being converted into fuel. The fuel is then burned, and that's where you get the energy. And there's two basic fuels. There's glucose, which is sugar, and then there's ketones, and they come from free fatty acids that come from either the digestion of cellulose or the turnover of body fat into free fatty acids that goes into the cells and is burned. So you're basically burning two things. There is a third thing called protein that they can burn for energy, but we don't want to do that. And that's what these horses that are losing their top line, they're basically burning their top line, their muscles, their amino acids, and they're consuming them, and they're being lost and not being replaced. So muscles break down, suspensories go away, immune systems fail, neurotransmitters go away. So now I'm going to shift gears just a second, because I've got you either listening to me or you've tuned me out. So let me shift the gears to stir things up a little bit. I just listened to a 3-part webinar presented by Succeed. And I love Succeed because I love the man who's behind it. Shout out to John. He's really got your interest at heart. He tells me, I tell him every time I see him that my job is to put him out of business. And he laughs and he says, please do. I'd be the happiest man on earth if you could convince people that they didn't need to Succeed anymore. But we all know that that's not going to happen, because horses are continually being fed grain. And if they're being fed grain, they're throwing off the microbiome, and they're consuming their muscles, and they're breaking down, and they're causing stress inside the gut and causing colonic ulcers of the colon. So this is all about the microbiota, which is another word for the microbiome of the gut. And it can also be in the lungs. It can be in your mouth. It can be on your skin, in your armpits. The microbiota is everywhere. But he was talking about what was in the digestive tract. And what was fascinating about the Succeed webinars was they decided that they would go to one of the leading experts on the gut microbiome in humans, because there's no money in studying this in horses. I mean, nobody's got the money to do really good research. They do research on underpowered studies, meaning they have 10, 20, 30 horses. They don't do it long enough. And there's usually an agenda behind it of some sort. Somebody's paying them some money somewhere to do this study. So in humans, they can get away with that, because you can get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people and study this for long periods of time. You can also use lab animals, basically rats, to mimic, because they feel that the rat and the mice are genetically modified to be responsive in certain ways, and you can select these animals to test your theories upon. It's a very complex subject, but there's a lot of true believers that most human research is bogus if it's based on another animal, including rats and monkeys. And that's true, because we're all different and within our own species, let alone several other species. But they've taken some rats and they tried to figure out where the microbiome actually starts, where you get it from. And of course, they've proven that is given to us by the mother. The bacteria that is in the vaginal canal bathes the infant as it comes out and sets up the microbiome. So does natural breastfeeding will seed the gut with microbiome. So cesarean sections and artificial milk replacers out of a bottle is probably about the worst thing you can do for a child. They actually now take cesarean section babies and they swab them in vaginal fluids from the mother to make sure that bacteria get on the skin and in the mouth and in the nose. So that was basically the essence of the first webinar. So when the foal is delivered, it comes out of the birth canal and it gets covered in the vaginal fluids, and that is loaded with bacteria that are good for the animal and help it survive and build and grow. So that was the first one. Then the second one was what humans are doing now in microbiome research on germ-free animals. and they're studying the gut-brain axis. So an axis is a word they use to describe a relationship between two parts of the body. And they're looking at how the gut influences the brain. And they were looking at anxiety and depression, amongst other behaviorals that are measured in humans. And they were trying to determine if the gut microbiome had an effect on that. And it did, wholeheartedly. It did in rats. And they were suggesting that you could add certain microbes to the gut of the. Sorry, I got a text right in the middle of this. I've got to stay focused here. They could add bacteria and actually use a microbe transplant as a therapy for treating depression and anxiety, because they showed that it made a difference. What they're saying is there's a huge trunk of fibers that runs from the gut to the brain and from the brain to the gut that we call the vagus nerve. Nothing to do with Las Vegas and gambling and having a rowdy time. It's just called the vagal nerve, and the vagus nerve and vagal tone. And we thought, going through vet school, that the brain sent its information down this vagal trunk into the gut and stimulate the gut to do certain things. Well, it turns out that it's actually mostly the other way around. It's at minimum 50-50 up and down versus down and up. But it's probably more. And they're now finding that the gut bacteria are signaling the brain to do certain things. For instance, if the gut is hungry, it'll signal the brain to go find food. So it motivates us to get out of bed and go hunting. And it also motivates us to stay in bed and curl up in a ball and want to just forget about the whole world. And depending on what bacteria are in there. Interestingly, a side note, I listened to a gastroenterologist, human physician / PhD, who studies the poop of humans and the microbes that are in it. And she, during COVID, went out and looked at plenty of families that were living out in the rural areas that weren't getting any medical attention. And some of these family members are getting COVID. And she found it fascinating that husband and wife could be sleeping and living and kissing in the same house, and one comes down with COVID, the other one shows no signs of it at all. So under her investigation, she determined that there are certain gut microbes that actually will eat the virus. And this stemmed from the New York City wastewater treatment systems, where they were studying the levels of SARS-CoV-2, which is a causative virus in COVID. They were studying it in the effluent, the wastewater, in the 14 treatment centers. And they found that they could measure the COVID rate, and any it correlated with a rise and fall of illness in the human population in New York City. Subsequently, they've done this in several cities, and they knew that the SARS-CoV-2 is being excreted in our waste. So this gal was taking that information, and she was able to culture out of these people some bacteria that were present in those that did not have COVID, that were absent in those that did have COVID. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And it shows that we are a team. I don't know how else to say it, a team effort. I mean, I'm a American football fan. And it doesn't matter what team sport you talk about. If one person fails on that team, the whole team will fail. If one is a superstar, it can sometimes compensate for deficiencies, but even a superstar will fail if there's multiple failures on the team. And the immune system, for instance, as well as the degeneration of nerves, lack of vitamins that are being made, lack of absorption of minerals, all these things can be brought back to one simple basic thing, that the gut microbiome is off. And we really have to start concentrating on the gut microbiome. So that's what these three seminars basically did. The first was where does it come from, through the mother. Second, the germ-free mice and how they could affect behavioral issues in these mice by altering the gut microbiome in there. And then the third, of course, was using gut microbiome as a therapy, which is an up and coming thing that you might be able to see in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. So at the end of each seminar, they tried to bring everything that we learned from humans back into the horse space, which is what I've been trying to do for years here at the Horses Advocate. So I was kind of pleased that John is doing this through his Succeed program. And it was funny because the conclusions that the veterinarian said on this presentation was decrease the amount of sugar the horse is eating, decrease stress. I forgot to mention that there's a big segment on how stress can relate to gut microbiome. And stress shouldn't be confused with distress. We throw stress and distress around a lot. Stress is like just living, just getting out there, doing the things, watching out for predators. I mean, there's normal stresses that we all go through. Nobody lives a stress-free life. But distress is things like shipping your horse in a carrier that the horse doesn't want to be in there, or showing the horse exhaustively, not giving the horse some downtime, putting the horse in a stalled environment next to another horse that he absolutely hates, and there's tension there. A groom that's in your barn that's not doing well for your horse, meaning he's aggressive or assertive with these horses. Feeding the horse that food that is not normal. They didn't evolve with grain. Even getting veterinary care with antibiotics and anti-inflammatories that are affecting the gut microbiome, putting a twitch on and stressing the horse to do a nasal spray for a vaccine. I tried to work on a Pasofino last week that somehow had just been castrated, and then a tube shoved up its nose to squirt this stuff, and he was shut down. And even though you could stand around the horse and touch him, pet him, put a halter on, as soon as I went to put anything in the horse's mouth, he became unglued and was unfloatable. And it's a shame because I've only had 3 that I know of that I haven't been able to float. And this horse, I had all 3 magic drugs that I carry with me in the horse's veins, circulating through his body, and he still was fighting me to the death to get anything done. And that's such a rare instance. But there's a horse there that is in distress, and that's affecting the gut microbiome, which is going to affect the whole health of the horse. So this podcast is to inspire you to know that you're on the right track because you're digging deep. You're not cognitively lazy, but actually you're energetic. You are digging deep. You're trying to find answers. You're trying to dig in there and see what we can do about things. I think that in the future, I'm going to bring to you some of the information that we have in the magazines. I love doing this, reading them and saying, well, what about this? What about that? I do this all the time when I see a farrier or a vet. I say, so what makes that stink when you put that hot shoe on the bottom of the hoof and all that smoke billows up and you curl your nose up and you say, oh gosh, that stinks, And I've yet to have a farrier tell me exactly what that is. They get down to, yeah, it's keratin. They all say it's keratin, but I say, well, what's in keratin that makes it smell so bad? And more importantly, once you find out what that is, why is that so important to be in that keratin? And nobody's been able to answer that. And I'm not going to answer it here. You're going to have to look it up because I've said it in several places. But I want you to think about it. I'll give you a hint. It's a certain amino acid that provides the strength that makes the hoof hard. And once you get that, you have to figure out if you're feeding enough of it. So I'm going to pretty much end this podcast right now. I'm on the road. I've got this background in because you don't want to see my hotel room. I'm doing a lot of traveling now. For those of you who know Melissa, she has bought part of my practice and she's on her own. Congratulations to Melissa. It's 13 years and 20,000 floats. So a big shout out to her. She and I work together on occasion for big farms to try and double team them. But she's on her own and I'm basically doing all of Florida as well as Louisiana and Long Island and just trying to keep my, stuff going. Oh, also toward the end of this month, right around Thanksgiving time, The American Association of Equine Practitioners is going to have their annual conference, which I will be attending virtually and listening to all the programs that I can and bringing to you what they're talking about. At first glance, there might be one or two things about dentistry in there, but there are so many other things that are out there. I'll keep you in touch with the current things that are going on in my take in it. I still am very disappointed when I hear anybody talk about feet or teeth or anything, colic. Very few people are talking about the microbiome or stress and how it's affecting it, or food. And again, kudos out to Succeed. They are on top of it. They're getting the good information and they're trying to apply it to the horse. And I think that's really brilliant. And it's up to us to try to get as much information as we can and interpret it for our horse. So that's about it. Giving you about 45 minutes of 40 minutes of what I think is pretty good information. And I will come back to you next week. They're kind of hit or miss right now. There's so much going on in my life. The holidays are coming in, the AAP program. I'll try to bang these out. If I miss a week, please forgive me. I try to get these out every Wednesday, or at least every other Wednesday, to keep you abreast of what's going on. So this Doc T, someplace in the world, not home, taking care of horses' teeth and reading and trying to give you some straight, unbiased, unagenda-driven business. Well, actually, there's one agenda. I want you to help horses thrive in the human world, which is very difficult to do when the humans are trying to mess things up. So, and I might even bring you up to speed about what I'm doing for myself. But anyway, that's about it here. Love you all. Thank you for listening. Please share this. Go to your podcast player like Apple's iTunes and leave a report there. The more people leave comments and 5-star reviews, the more it boosts the credibility and more people will see this around the world. And it's really important. I would love for you to just drop everything right now and go over there and do that, or make a reminder to do it tonight when you're free. And it's how the world works. If you don't like what I'm talking about and you have something to say, or you want to say something that's different, please go and reach out to me through the Horses Advocate. Just leave a message there and say, look, I don't understand this, or I don't agree with this, or have you heard about that? I'm open. I have an open mind as much as I can, and I'll try and get all the information I can to you in an unbiased way. thehorsesadvocate.com. Become a member. If you haven't become a member, think about it. It's a great Christmas present for y'all. Maybe we'll have a Black Friday event. I don't know. I have to talk to the boss. Oh, that's right. I am the boss. All right. That's it here. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There are 2 reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.